I'm Ann Charles.
I'm Linda Quinlan.
I'm Keith Ghostland, and today is Tuesday, February 13th. This is all things LGBTQ, and Linda's got delicious trash for us this week.
And it's Mardi Gras.
Happy Mardi Gras.
And your headlines.
Why, yes. Bermuda, let's not travel there. It has repealed same-sex marriage. Indonesia police probe the Aceh abuse of transgender women. More arrests in the Egyptian LGBT crackdown. Toronto's gay village serial killer suspect has been apprehended. Malaysian newspaper publishes how to spot a gay checklist.
Am I on it?
Well, no. Well, to be continued. An Australian anti-gay marriage opponent, Tony Abbott, attends his sister's same-sex wedding. And I have a picture right now of Christine Foster on the right, the sister of former Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott.
The one who opposed it, right?
Exactly. She's looking at her partner, Virginia Edwards, on Friday in Sydney on their wedding day. Nova Scotia mayor enters Tory leadership race after publicly coming out as gay. And I have a picture of him. He's Cape Breton Regional Municipality Mayor Cecil Clark. And he came out because someone threatened to out him, and now he's running for leadership position in the Tory party. Like in the same week he
Is that the Conservative, the Tory?
Yes.
Okay.
Gays and I'm not going to get to these sad stories, many of them. Gays in Ecuador raped and beaten in rehab clinics to cure them. Protest against AIDS movie, beats per minute, sparks fears in Romania. A Uganda human rights group is targeted in a violent break-in. And finally, some good news. Russia has made it easier for trans people to get their gender identity recognized. So those are the headlines.
In Russia, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We're still not going to treat you well, though.
No.
Yeah.
No, I think not.
You can have the surgery, but then you'll go to the gulag. Well,
you don't have to have the surgery. That's the breakthrough.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Oh, you gave away the...
Anyway, the Episcopal Church has a resolution calling upon their denomination General Convention to avoid the use of gendered pronouns for God, and it's gaining some traction, so we'll keep an eye out on that and see how that goes. Betsy DeVos is trying to take away the protections for all the LGBT community. She's willingly undermining Title VII and turning her back on individuals facing institutional discrimination. So,
But she was hurt that we didn't think she supported students.
I know. Breaks my heart. And I have a lovely Valentine's Day story, which I will get to later. And the media has forgotten this gay Olympian, and her name is Brittany Bowe. In 2017, she talked to NBC about dating Dutch speed skater Manon Kaminga, and they're happily in love. So that's another little Valentine's Day story.
And the Dutch are cleaning up at the Olympics.
Oh, they are. It's wonderful,
They've
isn't
got the
it?
most medals, yeah.
I know.
Now we know why.
A lesbian couple will appear in an ad. Hurley Haywood, in case you don't know who Hurley Haywood is, he's a race car driver. And he comes out at 69 in his new book, Hurley from the Beginning, which will be out in March. And he says he's never been discriminated against in the racing community because he was gay. So, and there's some super celebrity news. And George Washington Carver was the greatest bisexual scientist of his time. Did you know that?
I did not.
Well, neither did
I haven't thought of him in a long time.
And an openly
Black
gay
History Month.
An openly gay Marine is running for the House seat in Alabama. His name is Neil Rafferty. And I have a clip later on of lesbian musician sister Rosetta Tarp who was the grandmother of rock and roll. And we have, sadly, a couple of transgender women who were shot to death this week and killed, one in Jacksonville, Florida. Tell Amazon, no gay, no way. Walgreens ensures trans people will always be welcome in their stores.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean they're redecorating?
Yeah. Walgreens ensures trans people will always be welcome. Alabama girl suspended for asking girlfriend to a prom. And there are, I think, 8 lesbian movies coming out in 2018. And we'll have a little bit about that. So,
You're going to be busy.
A lot.
I know.
Walgreens. Friendlier. It means they're going to redo all of that nasty overhead lighting because you don't look good.
Is somebody going to talk about Publix?
I'm not.
Taking back, they said
They're going to give PrEP.
Right. Public outcry resulted in their
The
canceling
commentary was they shouldn't be ashamed for doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And they originally had refused to give their employees PrEP, which is the prophylactic to prevent infection with HIV.
Yeah.
And after, as you're saying, this incredible outcry, they've said, okay, you're right. This is the right thing to do, and we will do it.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk some about legislation because it's that time of year. Mardi Gras, Ash Wednesday, legislation. It all seems to go. In Vermont, we're going to talk about H562, the Parentage Bill, H820, taping of peer support groups, H385, expanding the jurisdiction of the Human Rights Commission, and then just a question of what happened with H333 and the gender-neutral bathrooms. New Hampshire, we're going to talk about the fun they're having with conversion therapy, and not to be outdone, Maine's having similar fun. We're going to talk a little bit about Burlington and hate. And don't believe everything you see on social media. UVM Men's Catamount made a strong statement in support of equality and inclusion. We'll get that. Christine Holquist, if you don't know the name, get familiar with it. Could be your next governor. And the happiest and healthiest state, and we'll come back to that. And this week's trivia question, this person is acknowledged as being the first out U.S. athlete. And I had a list to choose from.
Okay.
Well, let's start with a reversal in Bermuda. As we know, it's a British overseas territory with about 65,000 inhabitants.
Bless you, my child.
Thank you. It's the first country in the world to reverse its laws on same-sex marriage, doing so with remarkable speed. It's forbidden same-sex marriage only 9 months after legalizing it, and what advocates for gay and lesbian rights call a disappointing setback. Same-sex marriage became legal in Bermuda in May as a result of a ruling by the island Superior Court. But the unions are unpopular with some voters. In 2016, Bermudans voted against same-sex marriage in a referendum, and after the court ruling in May, the territory's legislature drafted a bill banning same-sex marriage, but giving all couples legal recognition as domestic partners. Parliament adopted the Domestic Partnership Act in December, and on Wednesday, the territory's governor, John Rankin, signed it into law. The British Prime Minister, Theresa May, said Britain was seriously disappointed, but the Foreign Office said on Thursday it would be inappropriate to block the measure. Everyone is up in arms about this, including cruise lines. Darren Byrne, founder of the UK-based LGBTQ travel firm Out of the Office, said we had out of the office, said we had customers interested in marrying at sea, and now they won't be able to. We'll be sending them to other, more welcoming destinations. Customers would likely rethink their travel plans, he says, because of this decision. Interestingly, he added that LGBT travelers have 23% more disposable income than heterosexual travelers on average. And so it's a shame that Bermuda has done this, as it will undoubtedly suffer and lose revenue. Also carried was a statement from the Rainbow Alliance of Bermuda, which painted domestic partnerships as a watered-down version of human rights. The group said the reversal had been done to placate conservative religious lobbyists. So there's been much disapproval in Great Britain. British Labour Party David Lammy, who is pictured now before you, a former minister in the last Labour government and one of the most important black lawmakers in Britain, told the House of Commons the first slaves were brought to Bermuda in 1620, oppressed, segregated, and discriminated against. That is why leaders such as Nelson Mandela, Desmond Tutu, and Barack Obama have fought not just for race rights, but the rights of lesbian, gay, and bisexual people. This country has been one of the world's leaders on the subject. He's talking about Britain, of course. So if this is not the issue on which to refuse assent, I do not know what is. So there we have Bermuda. I wouldn't travel there.
I've been there twice, but I won't go back.
I would not.
I'm turning in my bathing suit.
We're done.
On to the next story involving the Indonesia police and in the abuse of transgender women. As we know, Aceh province is the only province that is committed to Sharia law in Indonesia. It's the province that caned the gay people. Several hundred people rallied outside the Grand Mosque because online videos circulated the police forcing 12 transgender women to dress as men, shave their heads, and berated them about not being masculine. They were rounded up last weekend in raids on hair salons in North Aceh's Lukashan neighborhood. There's been a probe into the police action, and hundreds of protesters appeared protesting the police probe. So, bad news from Indonesia. Last December, Toronto police just downplayed rumors that a serial killer was in the gay village in Toronto. The community raised the possibility that two recent disappearances in the area could be connected to missing person cases involving men of Middle Eastern descent from the early 2010s. On January 18th, police arrested 66-year-old Bruce MacArthur, and here he is before you, after they entered his apartment and found a young man in restraints, later charging him, as the CBC further reported, with 5 separate first-degree murders of men. And we have the 5 victims now pictured before you. The serial killer rumors that the gay community had been raising for several years were not rumors after all. The problem here is, according to spokespeople from the LGBT community, is that many of the victims were of Middle Eastern descent. And although they were reported missing, some people are charging that the police didn't pay much attention until a white person, Andrew Kinsman, was found missing recently. And Kinsman had been a lover of this fellow MacArthur. MacArthur has a violent past. He had a restraining order put against him, forbidding him from going into the gay village, which he did anyway. So He's finally been arrested, but there's discontent in the community. He was a landscaper. They searched properties. That's where they found 5 of the bodies that he'd been landscaping, and they're still looking and thinking maybe more bodies will be uncovered. So it's a grisly story from Toronto.
It would be awful to have him as your landscaper.
He played Santa Claus in the mall.
They
He
all
belonged to a
play
gay
clowns and
fathers
Santa
group.
Claus. What is that?
I don't know.
You know, really?
It's your access.
Oh my God.
He stashed the remains of some of his victims in potted plants,
Oh, jeez.
and there may be more victims
It's like a
left.
Jeffrey Dahmer.
It's awful.
On another note, I have a little happy Valentine's
Oh,
Day
thank
story.
goodness.
All right.
And it's about John Banward, 100, and he met Jerry Nadeau, 72, in 1993. Neither of them had been openly gay. When we met, we were sort of in the closet, and I'd never had a real relationship. Now we've been together almost 25 years, Jerry tells John during a Story Corps interview. Of course. What would it have been like if you didn't meet me, Jerry asked John. I would have continued being lonely, John says. I'd been absolutely lost. Both are veterans, one had served in World War II, John, and Vietnam, Jerry. And when they moved into the veterans home together in Chula Vista, California in 2010, Jerry says people there wondered what their relationship was. Well, when they got married, they knew what our relationship was, Jerry says, laughing. The couple married in 2013, and John says he was surprised by the warm reception they received. I was expecting we'd be ridiculed, and there was very little of that, he says. We'd gotten married at the veterans home, and we said, if you come to see the bride, you're out of luck. Do you remember that, Jerry asked John, laughing. So that's a very nice love story for older people.
And for all.
For all, yes, but you know, where there's life.
Moving on.
A lesbian couple will appear in this ad. Now, has anybody ever heard of McCain as a brand of frozen potato products?
Yeah.
That's what I was
Yeah?
doing research.
Really?
Mhm.
Well,
Only
I have
recently,
never,
though.
I don't know, I haven't heard of them. But anyway, they're
I
sticking,
think it's a regional brand.
it's not around, is it
What
around
region?
here? Or?
Do you think?
I was thinking Midwest, but I may be
Maybe.
wrong.
Maybe.
We're the Wawa.
Yeah. But we distract you.
They're sticking to a campaign featuring diverse families, even though they have gotten all this hate mail and objection from conservative groups. They say they're going to celebrate real homes and is depicting honest modern-day family life. A new ad features a lesbian couple. Now for a little celebrity gossip. I don't know if anybody knew, but I was kind of surprised to find out that Richard Pryor and Marlon Brando were lovers. Did you know that?
What?
Yes.
No.
Okay, let's talk about The Odd Couple.
I know. Jennifer Lee Pryor, who was twice married to the comedian, corroborates claims by music producer Quincy Jones, noting that it was the 70s and drugs were still good. Lee Pryor added that Pryor wrote extensively in his diaries about his sexual relationships, which he will publish next year. So, there you go.
Any other names that will surprise us?
I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But Marlon Brando?
The
and
Actors
Richard
Studio,
Pryor?
that doesn't surprise me. But he and Richard Pryor
I know.
as a couple.
It just doesn't, no. But, you know. And now I have a clip of lesbian musician Sister Rosetta Tharpe, who was the grandmother of rock and roll. It wasn't born with Elvis Presley, it was born with her. And she was born in the heart of and the soul of gospel singing, and she was a black lesbian whose swagger and howling electric guitar will finally be recognized when she is inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. In 1946, Tharpe met singer Marie Knight After recording Up Above My Head, the pair teamed up and toured. So we're going to have a little clip of her, and she is dynamite. So.
Up above my head, I hear music in the air. Up above my head, there is music in the air. Up above my head, music in the air. And I really do believe joy somewhere. All in my room, music everywhere. All in my home, music in the air. Up above my head, that is music in the air. Well, I really do believe joy somewhere. Up above my head, music in the air, music in the air. Up above my head, there is music in the air. Up above my head, there is music in the air. You know, I really do believe joy somewhere. All in my home, music everywhere. All in my home, singing right there. Up above my head, there is music in the air. You know, I really do believe joy somewhere. Oh yes, oh yes. Let's do that again. Up above my head, music in the air. Up above my head, there is music in the air. Oh, good Lord, I really do believe joy somewhere. You know, all in my heart, music everywhere. All in my soul, it makes me whole. Makes me feel so good. It makes me so happy. And I do believe joy somewhere. Well, above my head. Thank God Almighty, music everywhere, up above my head. And don't you know, music in the air. Up above my head, music in the air. I mean,
On to you.
All right. And I'm supposed to follow that. Legislation, Vermont, we've been very busy. H552, which totally rewrote the parenting statutes, who could apply for recognition as a parent, has passed the House. And even though the official vote is yes 141, no 1, absent 7, the one vote was by mistake. So this actually passed our House unanimously, and it's constructed so that our families truly get recognized. H820 had its first hearing in House Judiciary. This is the bill that was introduced by Bill Lippert in response to the incident that occurred at the Pride Center, where the conservatives came in, covertly taped, made it look as though they were trying to teach the transgender community how to exploit and manipulate the healthcare system, which as an attorney frequently tells me that's such a bad thing. But one of the issues that we're going to have to be facing as this bill goes through and how the language is crafted, we keep billing these events as town hall events. Mm-hmm. That gets into a whole issue of public versus private. So this is one that we may not end up where we started or with the type of solution we were expecting. H385 is expanding the jurisdiction of the Human Rights Commission to include bullying. And it had its first hearing today in House Government Operations. And actually the Human Rights Commission came in and said, rather than giving us jurisdiction and authority because we don't have the staff to do it, let's look at how we change the statute so that people have greater options for a private action. Things that you can do if you're encountering bullying and you're not being supported. These are the things you can do. Part of my concern is how do we let people know
Yeah.
that they have the right to apply and how to, and that's asking the victim to be their own advocate, which I have some issues with. H333, the single gender neutral bathroom, seems to have been lost in the Senate.
Uh-oh.
It was in the same committee that's debating minimum wage. There's a meeting happening with the president pro tem of the Senate asking, you are going to act on this, right? New Hampshire and Maine are both working on banning conversion therapy. New Hampshire, their bill just passed the House, which is a significant gesture, a significant move. Concern with the legislation is that, as we had reported last year, it only pertains to licensed therapists. Maine has a different problem. They're having their first public hearing tomorrow, Valentine's Day, conversion therapy. Any connection? Maine has written into their bill specifically a religious exemption.
Uh-oh.
So that if you are the minor who is truly a member of that religious order,
You can go.
bingo. But they cannot advertise it, and it cannot be outside their faith community.
Well, they really don't have to if they're in that faith community anyway.
Well, there we are.
I know.
So really quickly, Patriot Front, alt-right conservative group, put out on social media that they were going to be holding a demonstration at the Staples Plaza in South Burlington. 250 counter-demonstrators showed up. Patriot Front unfurled their banner to Reclaim America at City Hall Park. Don't believe what you see on social media, but, and as Zach will be putting up, the UVM men's Catamount basketball team, they had their own response. As sponsored by the America East, they wore their spread respect warm-up t-shirts advocating the rights and equality based upon sexual orientation and gender
Good for
identity.
them.
And this is going to be an ongoing process.
Good.
Well,
So you're going to take me to someplace bad now,
hope-
aren't you?
We hope this spreads throughout the country and becomes.
No, it's through the entire American East.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'd like to add, getting back to the media, it's not only social media. I listened to Channel 3 the night that the Patriot Front was in Burlington, and they said they didn't show up, and then retracted it last night.
Yep.
You know, they said, you know, the
Yeah, 'cause
protest.
that's what I heard. They didn't,
No, they went someplace else.
So, don't trust any media, maybe, or listen on
PT
subsequent nights.
Sound like Trump
PTC
now.
got it right. PTC got it right.
Yeah, well, that's good. Egypt, this week police arrested 10 people in the latest assault on LGBT rights in the country under the rule of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. In the face of relentless persecution of sexual and gender minorities in Egypt, world leaders remain largely silent, or worse, praise el-Sisi as a moderate leader. The latest arrests bring to more than 85 the number reported to have been caught up in the massive crackdown on LGBT people since several young people waved the rainbow flag at a Cairo concert in September. Well, I remember we've told you about that. Many of those targeted are gay men and transgender women, or men perceived to be what they call effeminate. More than 40 have received prison sentences, with some subjected to forced anal exams, a form of torture. So there's a wonderful clip that I can't show you, but you might want to go to Color R, letter R, not shame, to look at the public outcry among activists around the world about, they say repeatedly, we stand with Egypt, even though elected officials aren't in our country as well. Rex Tillerson visited Egypt, didn't mention any of this. Let's go to Malaysia now, if we can, where a Malaysian newspaper, Sinar Harian, publishes a How to Spot the Gay checklist. And I have before you now a picture of lesbian rights activists ridiculing this article. They're holding up a sign, "Ignorance is not bliss." You'll see it before you. This newspaper has published the following pointers for identifying gay and lesbian people. Gay men are easy to identify because of their love of beards,
Oh, I am on the list.
going to the gym,
Ooh.
not me, but I'm not a gay, not for exercise, but to check out other men, and branded clothing. Their eyes light up when they see handsome men, the author said. The
Should I
standout,
tell you I'm wearing Joffrey Bean?
the standout attributes for lesbians were that they tend to hug each other,
Oh.
hold hands, and be little men, according to the
Oh,
newspaper.
they've a little man. Oh.
Now, homosexual, this is sort of bad to have this kind of thing floating around, even though it's kind of ridiculous. Homosexuality, as we know, is illegal in Malaysia and publishable under a colonial-era sodomy law that carries a 20-year prison sentence. Campaigners have called for a softening of rhetoric in Malaysian media after a series of recent deaths of men and women suspected of being gay or transgender. An 18-year-old student, T. Nanyaveen, was beaten and burned to death last year by classmates who said he was a pandan, a colloquial term for a gay man. A 27-year-old transgender woman, Samira Boshin Krishnan, was attacked with a knife and shot 3 times in a targeted attack in her florist shop a few months later. Arwind Kumar, an activist and one of Malaysia's biggest social media stars, lashed out at this article, saying it could take away lives. The Sinar Harian article was accompanied by an interview with Hanafia Malik, a preacher who warns that homosexuality is on the increase in Malaysia and says there is an urgent need to stop the trend. Homophobic rhetoric is also evident in government discourse. The country's deputy interior minister attacked Walt Disney, and I reported on this at the time, at the request of the Malaysian Censorship Board, and a Malaysian Health Ministry youth video competition called for entries discussing prevention and consequences of being gay, lesbian, or transgender. So the film, the Disney film, they wanted to cut was Beauty and the Beast because it had a gay scene. Another article on the Health Ministry's website entitled, "Why Would a Person Be Lesbian?" states that potential causes of women being gay were their decisions to prioritize their careers and believing other women were the only ones who would understand. So
There
don't
we
take
go.
your tips from the Malaysian press, is my advice.
Well.
I have more, but we can
No,
move on.
We have to move on. We're getting,
Okay.
okay. So, the Colorado GOP strips State Civil Rights Commission of funding over the wedding cake ruling. Representative state legislatures have stripped funding for the Colorado Civil Rights Commission. The commission is at the center of the Masterpiece Cake Shop case, currently in front of the Supreme Court. So. And I have some movies that are coming out in 2018, lesbian movies. One is called Bex. One is Disobedience. Another is Misconduct of Cameron Post, which I talked about before. But my all-time favorite.
Miseducation of Cameron
Yes.
Post.
No, the Misconduct of Cameron Post.
No, I think it's the miseducation.
No, I think that was the of Gene Brody.
No, that's... All right.
Okay, but your favorite is what?
But my favorite coming out is called Lizzie, about Lizzie Borden. being a lesbian and being in cahoots for the murder of her family with the maid.
I like that.
I know. This is my all-time
All
favorite.
right.
I can't wait to see that.
It's a little twisted, if you ask me.
I like Twisted, though. So
This
you
is
know.
all, girls acting badly.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
looking
know.
at the titles.
I know. We're the
Vita
wholesome
and
lesbians.
Virginia.
What?
Vita and Virginia.
That's not the V I
Oh.
thought you were saying, but okay.
My Days of Mercy and Tell It to the Bees. So we have a lot to look forward in lesbian movies for this year.
And Vita in Virginia
Is about Virginia Woolf.
and Vita Sackville West.
Yes.
And their romance.
And their romance, yes.
And if you have spare time when you're not going to the movies, you might want to consider helping with a gubernatorial candidate who might be the first major party transgender woman to run for the governor. And I couldn't say that that would be Christine Holquist, who seems to be gaining a lot of support from within the Democratic Party. So be watching that. The happiest and healthiest state, South Dakota. And they said it's because they have little significant worry or stress, and they like what they do, but they have to share the top spot with a state that enjoys a lot of supportive relationships, and we have love in our lives, and it might be us.
Oh. Now, are there similar populations, do you think, between? I mean,
It's the Dakotas, it's the Badlands, and we now
Yeah.
have an interview
yes.
with Senator Debbie Ingram, where we're going to talk about much more legislation than we actually got to. Hi, and we have a very special interview today with Senator Debbie Ingram, who you may have remembered from last season's show. And I'm just waiting to find out what things we have in common that we don't know that we can stumble across in the middle of the interview.
Yes, we had quite a revelation last time.
And it was a nice recall.
It was.
I went home and I actually found your ceremony.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
If you want, I'll even send it to you.
Okay.
So, Debbie, when she is not a senator, and we thank her for being a senator, is the executive director of Vermont Interfaith Action,
Right.
which I'm going to make the leap of faith being the operative word, that some of that justice and equality work with the interfaith action is kind of what directs what you do as a senator at the State House.
Yes.
Would that be inaccurate?
It would be accurate, yes. That's one of the reasons I ran, is because of the experience that I have in doing justice work with the AA.
And we really thank you for doing that.
Well, thank you.
And I have in front of me a very impressive list of pieces of legislation that you are either the lead sponsor or co-sponsor or actively involved in. And one of those bills was just starting to get debated today, and it was S-281 about systemic racism.
Yes.
And I've got to say, what really stood out for me is not only are you the lead sponsor, you're the only sponsor.
That's true.
And I know you were very involved last year with the work on racial justice and fair and impartial policing. What does this do that complements that work from last year, or what did we miss last year that you figured out we need to go in and fix?
Well, the idea is to expand oversight of systemic racism to other departments besides just concentrating on the police.
Okay.
And so in that way, it sort of goes hand in hand with what we did before. The bill is actually taking different shape, and it was rather hurriedly put together. The main reason that I'm the only sponsor is because we put it together right before the Senate deadline.
You were there and available.
That's
and
right.
Pleased. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, exactly. Yes, it's not that a lot of my colleagues don't also support this whole idea, but what it looks like it's morphing into. It started off as another board, which can sometimes be a little cumbersome. But what it's changing into is a position of litigator for the Human Rights Commission, to give that
Which
body,
they will appreciate.
yes, to give that body more enforcement power. and then also a new position in the Agency of Administration that would be a director who would collect data and look at best practices in all the different agencies of the administration and try to replicate them throughout.
From having sat in on some of the committee hearings last year where they were trying to put boards together and figure out who should be on boards and what was the representation and how did you recruit, I think I like this approach.
Yes.
I think it's going to be much friendlier. Now, you sit on two committees, Education and Health and Welfare.
That's right.
Health and Welfare has been spending a great deal of time working on several bills, one of which is S53, which is a publicly funded primary care system,
Right.
which
yes.
really has my attention.
Yes.
And you're one of the sponsors of this.
I am. It's very exciting. Yes, it's a universal primary care,
Okay.
which we view as a first step towards reviving the idea of a single payer system in Vermont. And it's really coming together. It's very exciting. The major emphasis of it is to start a fund to pool together the money that we need to provide primary care to every Vermonter without copays or deductibles.
That's what I was going to ask you about because
Yep.
the day that I tried to squeeze into the committee room, and it was definitely shoulder to shoulder in the committee room,
Yes.
I was really struck by the testimony from, I think it was the Cambridge Health Center, where the physician was saying there were people who didn't come in for care even though they had insurance because they were afraid of the high deductibles and copay, and several people who had died because
heartbreaking,
they
yeah.
just waited too long for something that
Right.
was truly treatable.
Yes. It's a horrible, heartbreaking reality of our system now.
And one of the other aspects of this that I keep promoting is looking at our communities. We traditionally don't go to healthcare because it's like I don't want to keep going to a different physician where I have to keep coming out.
Right.
And I have to keep basically training you about this is how you should be giving me healthcare. These are the things that you should be doing.
Right.
So
Yes.
keep doing that.
Okay.
Keep,
Yes.
the other piece is S175, which is about prescription drugs,
Yes.
which says that all of these nice medications that we send to Canada that meet all of the American standards, and they seem to be able to sell for a fraction of the cost. We'd kind of like to bring some of those back.
Exactly. Yes, we want to re-import them. and
Here, now please give it back. to
Right.
them.
Yes. Yeah. And that bill it will focus on the 25 most used drugs. And it will, a little bit of a tricky point was that Medicaid there's a provision in Medicaid called the 340B provision, which actually gives rebates to
Right.
providers for Medicaid pharmaceuticals. So we're trying to make sure that we don't infringe on that because that lowers the costs of drugs quite a lot.
If the Medicaid rebates were not part of that 25, would that exempt them?
Well,
Or is there more that needs to be done?
yeah, there's more that needs to be done to take a look at it and to as somebody famously said,
detail.
it's complicated, right?
Yeah, but this really is.
This really is. That's right.
Now, those two bills are moving along fairly well in health and welfare.
They are.
Are they likely to be voted out into the full chamber in the near future?
Yes, that
so
is
so
our.
if people have some interest, they should be getting in touch with their senators saying, yes, indeed, I support this.
That's right. Our goal is to get past both of them crossover so we can send them over to the House.
And crossover is rapidly approaching.
It is March 2nd. I
Yeah,
think, yes.
just before town meeting day.
Right.
The other piece for which you are a lead sponsor is trying to raise the minimum wage.
Yes.
And I understand it just went from economics and development to appropriations. So tell me what was your vision for minimum wage and what you thought should happen.
Oh, I'm very excited that we're moving on this. I really wanted us to do it even faster than the bill that got passed out of committee. is doing. I'd like to get the minimum wage up to $15 an hour by 2022. The date they settled on was 2024. So it's, you know,
And they had packed rooms as well.
They
as I
did. They
recall.
did. So it's not exactly what I was hoping for, but it's, you know, it is. I think it's so good on so many fronts. I mean, the most important thing is that there's so many hardworking Vermonters who are working 2 or 3 jobs and still not able to make ends meet, and it's simply because they don't make enough money. They don't earn. They aren't paid enough for the work that they do. So that's the most important thing. But also, it will be a great tool for economic development. The Joint Fiscal Office estimated that $240 million more dollars will be infused into the economy, because when you actually put money in the hands of working class people who are going to spend it on Vermont goods and services, you will generate more money.
I shouldn't believe that trickle down.
No, you should not.
I wonder
right.
where that came
Oh
from.
yes, where have we heard that before? Yeah, it does not work. That's right.
Well, I was going to say, we had reported in 2016, Maine did a citizens initiative, and it was about minimum wage and increasing it, which passed. And some of the statistics that Maine shared was about how our communities are traditionally underemployed and underpaid, because we're looking for a safe place.
Right.
You know, so we're willing to make that kind of degree of compromise. But also associated with the minimum wage, you're sponsoring an equal pay bill.
Yes, that's exciting too. We already actually have in statute equal pay for women, and that's been getting the most press. But what's wonderful is that this bill would expand that to cover members of our community and racial minorities and other protected classes.
And if I read the bill correctly, one of the provisions in the version that you introduced, if I am seeking new employment, they cannot ask for or use my previous salary history.
That's right.
In determining my rate of pay or my entry level for that new position.
That's a very important provision, because what often happens is somebody's desperate for a job, so they'll take a job at a very low rate of pay, and then they try to improve their position going to another company, but they're asked what their base salary was, and so if the employer raises their salary by maybe 5%, where they were 15% below where they should have been to begin with, the employer thinks, oh, I've done a great thing, I've raised their salary, but they haven't raised it to the level that it should be, and this cycle just keeps continuing every job they go
And
to.
if you have this level of position, there should be a comparable rate of pay that goes along with it. It shouldn't be determined by, what you have been accustomed to receiving.
Right, exactly.
This is what you're doing, and this is the level of which you should be compensated.
Yes, it's what the work is worth.
And as I'm looking at all my notes, okay, the one piece, the one bill that you did that really made me just giggle is S77.
Okay.
Do you remember what this one is?
No, I'm sorry.
This is the one we were kind of talking about before we started taping, where if you want to run for president.
Oh, that one, yes. That's right.
She's been busy, so.
It's hard to remember the numbers. But
It's,
sorry.
if you want to run for president, in order to get your name in the primary in Vermont, you kind of have to give us 5 years' worth of tax returns.
That's right. It seems only reasonable that we be able to look at, your financial history. And most, of course, up until this last election, everybody did that.
Exactly.
It was considered to be the standard. But when some people are recalcitrant, you have to actually write it into law.
Did you giggle as you wrote this bill?
A little bit. Yes.
Had a good time saying you really want to sign on to sponsor this, don't you?
Right.
But a serious piece of legislation is the family leave bill that you've introduced.
Yes.
And this would again put money into a pool.
Right.
And would guarantee how many weeks of paid family leave?
I believe 8 weeks is what the House passed, but 12 weeks is what we
you
were
had
asking for.
And that would extend not only for childbirth or adoption, but also to care for a spouse, a partner, etc.
That's right. Close family member, yes. Yeah, in my own personal situation, I was able to take leave when my mother got very ill and then passed away, and I took the time to, clean out her house after I had been able to spend time with her during her last days. And you know, why should my family and my relationship with my mother matter more than other Vermonters? So we should have something like this, which is an insurance program, basically, so that other people can
As
take
I lean
advantage.
in, as we are literally down to our last minute.
Oh my goodness!
I know, we've done it again.
I know. Gosh, it goes
Is
so
there
fast.
anything that's going on in the Senate for which we haven't touched on, people should be aware, other than Indigenous Peoples' Day?
Indigenous Peoples Day, yeah, is very important. Two pieces of civil rights legislation in my mind. Indigenous Peoples Day would help us to recognize that.
It's a sincere apology.
Yeah, exactly.
And recognition
of our
you were here.
imperialism and colonialism. And then I have a bill that would allow the public defenders in the state
Immigration.
to represent people on matters of immigration.
And that's
right.
being voted out.
Tomorrow. That it's been stripped down quite a bit because it was costly, but the underlying principle is still in the bill, and I'm very proud of that.
You've been very busy. We've
That's-
gone over time.
Oh
But
gosh, it happened so
you're
quickly.
going to have to come back.
That sounds like a deal.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was good.
Yeah.
And there was so much we
wow,
didn't talk
I
about.
know. We have to have her back.
she's gonna
because
have to be
you
back.
were both incredible. That was really good.
So this person is hailed as being the first out U.S. athlete, and I gave Lyndon and some choices, and they didn't do too well. It was in 1920. The person was Bill Tilden, and he was the first male to win the singles title at Wimbledon. And with that, we thank you for joining
But
us.
what about the other ones? Billie Jean King and
Those were your guesses.
yeah, but
Okay,
Okay.
there was, in 1968, Tom Waddle, who went on to start the gay games. 1975, David Copay, who was the first athlete to pen a biography identifying sexual orientation. And in 1981, not to be outdone by Billie Jean King, it was also Martina Navratilova.
and those were good years.
Damn, she had thighs.
Ugh.
Oh
With
my.
that, we say thank you. Be sure to look for our youth edition.
Yes.
And as Linda always says, resist.
Resist.